Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Supra Insider. Today's episode is a little special. Mark and I both just got back from respective holidays and actually haven't recorded an episode for this week. And instead, we wanted to share a previous conversation I had with Adam Fishman on the Startup Dad podcast. As you all know, we're coming up on, it's got to be 75, 80 episodes at this point. And you've heard a lot of how we think about product management, AI, startups. And one of the things that we think is helpful in the podcast we listen to is to feel like we get to know the hosts better by learning more about just how they think about life outside of the tactical work that they do, but just more about them as people. So this conversation goes deep into a little bit more about me outside of just what I do for work. And we do spend the first 10, 15 minutes talking about career and work, but we go into a lot of other aspects of fatherhood, parenting, and love to use this platform to just drive a bit more attention to a podcast that I love. And Adam's a great host, asks awesome questions. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with Adam Fishman on the Startup Dad podcast, and we will be back with the usual kind of episodes starting next week. All right, thanks. Enjoy.
Welcome, Ben Aras, to Startup Dad. Ben, glad to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam. I'm really excited about this.
Let's jump into it. You, sir, have an almost 2.5-year-old daughter, probably pretty close to that now, but you are also the parent to someone named George. So tell me about both of your kids.
So the first one's laying right there behind me. I don't know if you see him curled up on his dog bed. George is our almost 8-year-old golden retriever. Got him in San Francisco as a 8-week-old puppy, and he's the first one I've raised from scratch with my wife. So that's a huge part of our family. Yeah, we've got a 2-year-old daughter named Gaia, and they're best friends, mostly through her leaving food on the floor for him in a bunch of places. So that's the fundamental thing that bonds these two, is the love of food and sloppiness around handling food.
Love that. I have 2 retrievers, a white one and a red one. So I have one that kind of looks a little bit like George, and they also love food. And my last dog, when my kids were really young, probably about Gaia's age, their like favorite pastime was, let's see how much stuff I can drop from the high chair and have the dog like run around and grab it. And it was the greatest game in the world for them.
To push it to taunting him. So she'll hold out something from her high chair, and then just in time for him to come and try to eat it, she takes it away and she thinks it's really funny. But then other times when she just throws food on the floor and just assumes he'll clean it.
It's a pretty good assumption.
We've actually had a hard time sometimes cleaning up after her when he's at his like dog sitter or something, when we come back from a trip and she just throws food on the floor. My wife and I look at each other like, do I have to pick it up this time? Yeah.
I did that same thing. We had the dog at a dog sitter's house. We were going on a trip, and like something ended up on the floor, and my wife and I just like walked by it for like several hours. And then we were like, oh, the dog's not here. So I guess we have to clean that up. So,
yeah, it's the old school Roomba, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you never thought you wanted a daughter, but now you love being a girl dad. So tell me about the majesty of being a girl dad.
I knew I wanted to be a dad, but I don't think I ever explicitly knew whether I had a preference towards being a boy dad or a girl dad. I just wanted to be a dad. And then it wasn't until we found out we're having a girl that I realized how much I had been subconsciously holding this almost like assumption that I was going to have a boy. Until then, it was never conscious. And then I have one sister who's 6 years older than me, and I kind of saw in my childhood and as an adult, just like how her relationship with my dad has been special in ways that it's just completely different than my relationship with my dad and my relationship with my mom. It's just like the daughter-father kind of relationship always seems so special. And I kind of got really excited and emotional about having like an opportunity to have that kind of relationship. And then it's fantastic. I know a bunch of other girl dads here in Brooklyn that live around me, and I probably carry a slight bias towards being maybe a little bit more friendly with the ones that have daughters than sons, because I feel like the nature of our bond with our kid is a little different. Mm-hmm. So I love it. I think it's super gentle and playful, and I see so many parts of my wife in her that are very like feminine, and like it starts early, and I just love that kind of like female energy in a kid. Is something really special.
That's great. Well, congratulations on being a girl dad. So you got many more years of excitement in front of you. I too have one girl, one boy too. We got something in common there. You mentioned to me the Brett Weinstein quote, children will destroy your life and replace it with a better one. Tell me about that destruction and rebuilding of your life.
When you're expecting, you start sensitizing yourself to all kinds of advice and resources and stuff. And for some reason, in the months leading up to having our daughter, that quote kind of like stuck out as something that maybe set the right level of expectations about what might happen. And I think for us, we've been fortunate to be able to, I think, keep a lot of the things that matter to us intact in our life. It has not been a destabilizer in any way of having a kid in the way that destroying your life sounds. I think for me, what it feels more like is a process of trimming and reprioritizing, like adding a level of intentionality, I think, about life that wasn't there before. The destruction is this kind of like maybe creative destruction or like a positive kind of forest fire to kind of clean up the brush and prepare for setting the stage for the next phase is kind of mostly what it's felt. But it's organized chaos is a lot of what it feels like. And it's very meaningful organized chaos, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. What are a couple of the things that you found yourself trimming as you became a dad?
Things like going out for the sake of going out, socializing for the sake of socializing. If I'm going to socialize these days, it's because I'm being intentional about socializing. Like I need some socializing time. So I think maybe like the default patterns, the default habits have changed. Also, because I do dad duty in the mornings, like so every day I'm out of the two of us, I'm the morning person. So I go to Gaia at like 6:15, 6:30 in the morning. And so therefore I have to be very rigid about my nighttime routine to get to bed. So an example is like being able to squeeze in some work at night or catch up on work on the weekends. Like I can't do those things anymore, which has created this compression function on workday productivity. It just feels like this compression during the week and then this complete wiping of what I can control as far as time goes on the weekends.
Maybe those casual social interactions, they're not happening much anymore, but because the stuff you do is so much more meaningful and intentional, like they're higher quality interactions when you get the chance to do them. Maybe you're concentrating the quality of the social time.
I love social time these days with like if I can socialize with another family. So like I'm with my wife and my daughter and we're hanging out with another set of parents and their kid or kids at the park or something. It no longer fits in like the social bucket. It fits into like the family time bucket. So I feel like there's been this expansion of my intentional time spent on family bucket. And there are, of course, spontaneous social interactions that come up. Like you're walking at the park, you run into another couple and their kids, and now you're going to go get coffee and the kids play. I still consider that almost like intentional socializing, but in the context of family. I think the things I don't do as much, like really specific, is like the once a week happy hour after work to like go get beers with other guys. Like I don't do that. Like I feel like it kind of kills my energy. And I just have less and less in common with people that I think are available to like go out.
Yeah, you're not like YOLOing the weeknights so much anymore. So
I'm trying to age gracefully if I can.
That's good. So speaking of work, because we talked about kind of compressing, you've been a founder, a product manager, product leader, and now you have what you described to me as a portfolio career. And I put portfolio career in quotes, in air quotes, if you can do that on a podcast. What is a portfolio career?
I forget where I heard this term. I didn't come up with it. The competitors for how I would describe what I do are like, I'm in a fractional phase or I'm in a solopreneurship phase. You know, it's kind of to some degree, I view fractional product work as a subset of the overall solopreneurship phase. But when people ask what I have, I can't say I have a solopreneurship or I have a fractional. So I think of the portfolio career as like the thing I actually have. That these are like these different swim lanes into which I'm putting time. And my current portfolio looks, I have a part-time PM role at a Series A fintech company. So that's letting me stay fresh as a PM, but at a very small amount of time commitment. I have a Maven course that I teach that I just finished the 6th cohort of. That's been featured on Lenny's newsletter and Lenny's list. And I'm getting ready to run the 7th cohort of that. And then I have a co-pilot that I built that reinforces a lot of my frameworks that I teach in my course, but people could buy that on their own. And I'm constantly like tweaking and iterating my AI co-pilot for that, which has been a nice revenue driver. I host a podcast on, it's called Supra Insider. That doesn't make money yet, but we've been building the audience quite nicely for that. And it's giving me a lot of energy. So when I think of my portfolio career right now, it's kind of like a set of almost like batteries, I imagine. every day it's almost like I put all 4 batteries, it's 4 or 5 depending on when we talk about this, but put the batteries in the wall, let them all charge up. And then when I wake up in the morning, I can extract as much energy as I need from each battery. And then I can move on to the next battery. And I've really just embraced context switching and floating attention spans. I've never been diagnosed with anything like ADD or ADHD, but like right before us recording this, I was doing completely something different. And right after we're done with this, I'm going to go score like grade homework assignments for my Maven course. And I love just like the contrast between the different ways of spending energy versus for the 10 years before this, spending all of my time at, really like one full-time job at a time. And all of my cycles go into that one thing.
Maybe it's a little self-reflection here, but you do like, 4 or 5 or 6 different things. Some people might say, like, is it hard to focus as a dad? It doesn't sound like that's your issue, because it sounds like you maybe would have a harder time if you weren't doing that stuff.
I wouldn't relegate family time or fatherhood into one of the batteries, because I think it trivializes it a bit. But I do think that my view of fatherhood and family time and quality time with my wife and daughter is one of those things that I get a tremendous amount of energy at it up to a certain number of hours. And then I start to itch to do work, productive things. Spending time with a 2-year-old is really fun, but it's not intellectually satisfying in the sense of like building something or pushing my craft in some way. I go back and forth on whether family time is another battery that I tap into versus it being like the water into which everything else just fits. My fear with the second or the latter is that I never want to take the family stuff for granted. I never want it to just fade into the background, and I never intentionally focus on it. So I kind of am trying to treat it more as like a very specific thing that I should give dedicated time and energy to so I don't fall behind.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned to me in our prep for this is that, and again, this feels a little counterintuitive, that being a solopreneur or having a portfolio career actually makes you feel more stable, which is the opposite of what somebody might expect. They're like, oh, I got to juggle all these things. Like, where's my next source of money coming in from, So I hear from a lot of solopreneurs who, they get out of the game because they're like, well, I couldn't handle the context switching. I couldn't handle the instability. But for you, it's different. How do you think it's different for you?
So I've been doing this for almost 1.5 years, I think, since I've had my last full-time role. So I'm still early to it, I would say. But when I was working at Continuum, which was the marketplace for fractional executives, I talked to over, 50 or 60 executives that were doing fractional work, either making it to their full-time, like they want to stay with it and commit with it, or people that try it and then go back into full-time work. So I know I've actually made it further than a lot of the people that dabble. One of the biggest reasons I saw people not want to stick with it were people who I think had a very hard time balancing the business development side of it, marketing yourself, with doing the work. And the thing that I'm doing that's, I think, different than a lot of the people that want to do just fractional work is, as I mentioned, fractional work is just one of the things in my overall kind of strategy. So I actually really only do one fractional product work thing at a time. So I don't have the context switching between multiple startups that I'm doing like part-time PM work at. I actually tried that in the first few months last year when I was getting started, and I realized I hated that. I hated having 2 startups that each was getting like 15, 20 hours a week of my time. That drained me. But being able to do something like 15 hours a week total of part-time product work, and that's the only product PM work that I do, and I get to spend all the other time on other kinds of things, has made the path feel more sustainable to me. And then back to your question around safety and security, it kind of feels like my revenue diversification is resilient. So no one can fire me. The biggest hit that I can take right now to my income is just because I have 4 or 5 unique income streams, is like, I think maybe I'm the most concentration I have in one income stream in a given period is maybe like, depends on the month, but like 30 to 50% of my income. So I think that that's what I mean by feel safer, is like, because I coach people, my course is a job search, like interview prep course, and I coach a lot of people in their interview search. So many people are coming out of companies where they thought they had security, like it's a full-time job. I've been here 5 to 10 years. I've been getting great performance reviews, and before you know, you just get the boot and now you're back on the market. So that's kind of what I mean, is like, who has more job security at this point? The person that's been in their full-time job for 5 years, or someone who's got 4 or 5 different revenue streams that are diversified?
That makes a ton of sense. All right, I want to talk about your kids some more and your partner. So tell me about the decision-making process for you and your wife when it came to having kids.
My wife is a couple years older than me, and we have been together now for a little over 10 years. And our daughter, as I mentioned, is almost 2.5. So we had quite a good run before we had kids and did a lot of travel and enjoyed life and lived in San Francisco for a while and then moved to New York about 3.5 years ago. And we talked about starting a family in San Francisco, but I don't think either of us ever had this burning desire to have kids in San Francisco. And then when we decided to move to New York, my wife got pregnant 6 months later. So I don't know if it just coincidence or if we actually just felt like something was more resonant in New York. But I think we kind of embraced that at that point. And when I think about the thought process in the years leading up to that, to like, we didn't take it for granted that we should have kids. We actually thought about not having kids. Like, life's pretty fun. We can do a lot of things. We can take all this money and time and energy and I guess put it towards more of what we've been doing and that kind of thing. In typical PM fashion, I started thinking in terms of pros and cons and just talked to everyone I could to ask them, what would you put in each column just based on your experience having kids? And what was interesting for me is that the cons column of having kids, like what reasons not to have a kid, were all these kind of like known knowns. Like they're all things that like I like about my life that will change or evolve in ways that feel unfavorable in some capacity. And then the pros column was all this kind of like cliche, open-ended, anecdotal, hand wavy stuff from people about why it's the best decision they've ever made to have kids. And so for me, it kind of ended up looking like this like very long list of cons, each of which is very known. And then this like magical black box of like, there's only one way to know what's in the pros column, and it's to actually have kids. I think it's a leap of faith of some type to end up deciding in that decision to have kids. I'm so happy I did, and we did. And I'm happy that my wife was excited as well. I think our biggest challenge was just thinking about timing, right? Like, it feels like there's never a right time to do it. For example, we talked about going to like Burning Man for the longest time, and we never got tickets, and we finally got tickets, and the tickets would have been for that summer right after we found out she was pregnant. So we were like, crap, like we got to cancel Burning Man. We also booked this 2-week trip to Peru to go hike Machu Picchu and stuff. And obviously we wouldn't be able to do that when she's like 7 months pregnant. So there was like these like frustrating trade-offs that we had to make that were very short-sighted in hindsight, but we made the trade-offs obviously. But those were some of like the challenges. That's like, is there ever going to be a right time where this just feels like everything's calm enough to like have kids?
There's no homeostasis moment, so to speak, there.
I mean, if you're doing things well, there should always be a lot of progress, momentum, zigzagging, adventure.
Yeah. Did you review your pros and cons list with your wife, or did you make it together?
We never wrote it down, but we just talked about it a lot, right? So basically every time we talked about it, I felt like our implicit dialogue took the form of me presenting all the cases for why the black magic box is better than the sum of all of the ticks in the negative in the cons column. And her being like, yeah, maybe. It's like you kept going back and forth about it. Yeah.
I love that you PM'd it too with the pros cons list, and then when it was time, did you like draft a PRD for your wife, and you're like, all right, here's how this is gonna work.
No, my wife is also French, so she's not into any the very structured way of communicating about family or relationships or life.
Yeah. I have interviewed a few French folks on this podcast just to learn about a different perspective. So, all right. So you live in New York now. Your wife got pregnant about 6 months after you moved there. And now you've been raising a family in New York, which to me sounds terrifying. I mean, I live in the burbs now. Although I guess you do too, maybe Brooklyn. I don't know. It's still New York, though. Do you have friends and family nearby?
It's mostly friends we've met in this stage of life, or right towards the end, maybe some acquaintances from SF that are now at the same stage of life here. So we have a really nice community, growing community of other parents with kids, and I'm super grateful for that. I don't think it's helpful in a childcare sense, but when you can get together and your kids can keep each other busy and play, I think that just takes a little bit of pressure off for moments to just feel like you're enjoying the weekend with some other adults sometimes. No immediate family though around here. My mom, as I mentioned, I have one sister. So my sister and my dad live in Israel. And then my mom lives in Florida. And then my wife, Carol, her parents live on opposite sides of France. So both of our parents are divorced and we're scattered, and she has no siblings. So we're basically out here on our own. And then the biggest form of childcare support or help that we get is our daycare, and we love our daycare.
Yeah. I was going to ask, besides your furry vacuum cleaner, George, what other support structures have you found that you needed to get into place as a young, set of young parents in New York without really any family nearby? Is daycare, no nanny? What was your decision process around daycare, or what some of the support structures would be?
It's something that every parent I know here is thinking through, and everyone comes to different conclusions, and there's no right answer. For us, so my wife works as well. Carol works at a company called Fair. So she's got a pretty demanding job and likes her career. So she had, I think, 4-ish months maternity leave. So Gaia, our daughter, started in daycare when she was about 4.5 months old. And she's been in the same daycare this whole time. She's gone up a few classes. We've had some babysitters that we tap into. There's actually a really nice kind of French community here. So my wife's been able to get some babysitters that are here for like either foreign exchange programs, or they're not quite au pairs, but they just like really solid French women, and they're usually early 20s or something, that are here for a year or 6 months. And they'll come and they'll read a book or watch a movie or something and watch Gaia while we go have dinner or go out see some friends. So that's been helpful. And then you mentioned George. So every time we travel or go somewhere, because he's a 75-pound dog, we can't really take him with us. We have an incredible dog sitter that lives an hour outside of the city and loves to watch George at no charge, because he's like independent, like he's retired, and he's ripped up a couple of checks when I've tried to give him money for stuff. He loves to watch George, and he's watched him for as long as a whole month when we've gone to France to see Carol's family. So I think that's been a huge form of support. Don't take him for granted at all. That's basically been the forms of support we've had.
So you mentioned your wife, Carol. She works in localization, travels a decent amount, it sounds like, with her job. That means many times during the week you are a solo parent. But I think you've learned something, and some dads in your position would be like, oh my God, what do I do? It's, diapers, bottles, daycare. It's probably a cop-out for many dads, but you've learned something a bit counterintuitive about solo parenting during those weekdays. What is that?
I think in my mind of parenting on weekdays and parenting on weekends as two completely different buckets of parenting. I am about actually this weekend to go through my first solo parenting on a weekend. My wife is finally taken kind of like a special Mother's Day trip with a few of her good girlfriends from New York, and they're going to go to Colorado for the weekend. For the weekdays, I think that the thing I mentioned that felt counterintuitive to me when I started thinking about it, and then the more I've bounced this off of other dads, seems to resonate well with a lot of other dads that I know in the neighborhood, is that when I think of the day-to-day playbook or the day-to-day routine or logistics of just like getting through the day with a kid, you've got your like morning chunk, you've got daycare drop off at the end of that, then you've got your work day, and then you've got the pickup, and then the period for us, it's like basically to feed, bathe, put to bed, and then you've got your little evening chunk and go to sleep, and then you do the whole thing again the next day. I usually do the morning piece of it, and then my wife does the pickup and bring home piece of it, and then we kind of share like the what happens at home piece of it. And there needs to be coordination. It's kind of hectic at home in both the morning and the evening because we're both kind of tag teaming the whole thing. And so what I found is that a lot of my stress about these routines comes from a fundamental and coordination stress. It's not the tasks themselves being like stressful or demanding, or like my daughter throwing curveballs at me or something. Like those are, turns out, not the stressful things. Is like, did you put the backpack together? Like, are the diapers in the bag? Is the water in the bag? Did you get the pacifier? And, like, did you check when the bus is coming? Did George go out? Right. So it's all these questions of like, did you feed the dog yet? So it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And that makes me stressed. So what I find is that when my wife is gone on weekdays for work trips, for example, and I just have to do the whole thing on my own, I just keep it all in my head and I know what happened, because if I didn't do it, no one did it. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that the control freak in me finds that quite relaxing. So I find it very rewarding and even kind of like fun to get through solo parenting on weekdays because I get to use daycare. I've had to do that, I think, on 1 or 2 work days where either daycare was closed or my daughter was homesick from daycare. And those feel more like weekends, which is just hard because it's like I need to go when can I go to the bathroom? It's like, if it's just me, like those are the kinds of questions that I think are challenging.
So I want to talk about weekends for a little bit, but I do think that's really interesting what you mentioned, that when you're on your own, there's just no communication overhead. And so again, like a great PM, you're like, I'm in charge. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to inform my engineers or my designers or my spouse about what's happening. Or
or ask for updates.
Yeah, or ask you get your daily stand up with your wife. So okay, so weekends. I always find this fascinating because I work with a bunch of founders, and a lot of founders that I work with are younger, don't have a family. It's sort of the idea of a family is like a novelty to them. And they're always like, hey, if you want, we could get together and jam on this over the weekend. And I'm like, oh, I don't think you quite understand what weekends are like for parents. No shade to them. They don't know. I didn't know when I was young and didn't have kids. I was like, oh, it's weekends are for fun and catching up on work. Obviously, that's not your experience. So why is that? Why are the weekends so different from the weekdays?
So maybe this gets at the crux of just like the structure of our parent style, but we're like 50-50 partners is kind of what it feels like. So we like to do things together. Basically, the default is that we're together doing everything. And then if one of us has to like peel out to do something on our own, it's usually like an explicit thing that's like, hey, I got this thing to do. Can you watch Gaia while I go do this thing? I think I need the weekends more than my wife does to catch up on some work. Carol's warmed up to giving me maybe a couple hours on a Sunday to like catch up on things. But I try to not work on Saturdays if I can. Like I don't ask her for that on a Saturday. She never asks me to cover for her to get work done on the weekends. The main reason weekends feel full, more full than weekdays, is because the assumption is that I'm going to be always on for family and fully focused on family on the weekends. And then the curveball that I think is hardest to explain to people is that there's an unpredictability to like how the weekends play out. Like I can't make weekend plans. And in the beginning I tried, and then like you're like 45 minutes late to something that's going to be whatever, like an hour, and it makes no sense. So that's kind of where I've found that I just tell people no weekends. If it doesn't matter to me enough to move things around during the week to make time for it, then maybe that's a sign that it's just not going to make the cut. It's not a priority.
I remember one time I asked a dad, this is before I had kids, I was like, what do you really want to do this weekend? And he's like, my ideal situation is just like have a cup of coffee and an hour and sit at the table and read the newspaper. And I was like, okay, cool. Love that. And now I really have a full appreciation for that.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please check out the links in the show notes to support the podcast. Mark and I do this out of love, but to keep it going, we also need your support. Thanks, and now back to the episode. Obviously, anyone with a basic understanding of economics understands like supply and demand dynamics, and if something is in short supply, its value goes up, right? The shortage of time available to do things like read a book with a coffee on a Saturday morning when it's nice out, and just like have a notebook and write thoughts that come up and whatever creative grooves I could get into in my mid and late 20s in San Francisco at a coffee shop. I just don't have that time on weekends. But this is another big advantage to this kind of portfolio solopreneur thing that I guess technically you and I are both doing right now, is like, if you want to carve out your mornings or afternoons during the week to do something, you can. And so when I have my Calendly links, don't let anyone book time with me in the mornings. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I never have morning meetings, which makes me really happy because I get to go to a coffee shop and sit with my laptop and write cool shit down on notebooks and get focus time done. It just happens during the week. It's not things I can do on the weekend anymore.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best parts of that portfolio approach. I do the same thing. My calendar is pretty blocked in the morning so that nothing can be scheduled, and that's me time. What are a couple of the most surprising things that you've discovered as a dad?
I find myself, whether it's on the bus with my daughter, I traveled with her last Thanksgiving to Austin to visit my best friend, solo actually, so I went on a plane with her alone. And I had this moment where I realized, like, I've been so many places with her, and every time I go somewhere with her, I feel like it's exactly where I belong. Like there's a sense of belonging just by being with her. And I found that surprising because like I felt way more at home traveling with my wife than I'd be on my own. Like being with my daughter feels like I'm creating a little bubble of whatever home means, like in that moment. It could be on the bus, it could be in a restaurant, it could be in the airport. And so that's something that it was just kind of impossible to simulate the feeling about before I had her. And I can contrast that with maybe senses of like when you're younger, or when I was younger, feeling like a little insecure, not being able to find my place in an environment of some kind, like a new place, and I kind of feel like I'm all on my own. If people can manufacture that sense of feeling like entirely at home and at peace and like a perfect sense of belonging where they are on their own, that's beautiful. And maybe that's a path of mindfulness and meditation or something like that can get you there. But for me, just literally just being with her anywhere just feels kind of like I'm exactly where I need to be. That's been really, really special and surprising.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm also very curious about that solo airplane flight with the 2-year-old over Thanksgiving. 2-year-olds have a lot of energy, by the way, for those listening that may not have a 2-year-old. And an airplane is a relatively confined space. So, did you have like a Mary Poppins-esque bag of things that you just keep pulling stuff out of? What was your dad's strategy for that flight?
I'll give 100% of the credit to my wife for preparing basically all like snacks, games, all the entertainment bundle that was required to keep my daughter well fed and entertained. I just had to execute. I think the flight to Austin was a little trickier because our plane was like 2 hours delayed. So we just like hung out on the ground for 2 hours before taking off. It was kind of getting warm on the plane, so they had to open like the sleeve, and we had to go outside to cool off in November. So it was like freezing outside and it was too hot inside. So just balancing like the temperature swings. But there was a really nice gentleman that was sitting next to us in the row, and he was really cool. He had his own kids, or he's already a grandparent. I feel like people were really cool with me, like in general, traveling with a kid. Everyone just like, it's like the world just opens up to you in ways like, it's like, where's all this generosity when I'm just like not with my kid, right? Like being fully responsible for another person while traveling is a very interesting experience because most of my travel experience was either with my wife, where my wife is primarily taking care of my daughter, or on my own, where I'm like watching a movie or listening to a podcast or something. You can't listen to a podcast or watch anything when you're taking care of a kid. It's like, it's a full-time thing. And it's also very dizzying is probably one of the words that I would use, like visually, because the space is so confined and it's so small, and kids are dropping stuff and moving around and spilling and going up and going down, and the screens, like every time I tried to turn off the screen on the plane, it kept turning back on again. And it's like, so you've got these LED screens, like, I don't know. The whole thing was just like visually like walking through a casino in Vegas or something, but on steroids. Yeah, it's just too much.
Wow. All right. Well, let's talk about something that's not too much. Maybe not for you, could be for other people. I want to talk about bedtime routines because one of the things you mentioned is that you have a good bedtime routine that works for you and Carol and Gaia. And you started it when Gaia was about 3 months old. So can you walk me through Ben's door busting tip for bedtime routine?
And again, I give all the credit to Carol on this because I think I was just following her lead a lot until today too, but especially in the beginning. But she had this idea probably around 3 months that in hindsight, it's linear. At the time, I'm sure it was like, we should try this. Like we were probably scrambling to do something. But we basically ended up doing the bath, body temperature, probably, I don't know, like 5 minutes or something. And at that age, it's like, so they barely move, right? So you just kind of rinse them a little bit, dry them off, took her to the bedroom, put on her diaper changing station, massage her with some, I think at the time it was either baby oil or just like some lotion. I forget what it was. And then put on her sleeping stuff and then give her a bottle and put on her Hatch. We use Hatch, put on the bedtime music and get all the light down and quiet down, and then just hold her until she falls asleep, and then just put her in the crib. And we just like walk out of the room. It stuck. I think that first time we probably put her down around 7:30 or 8 p.m. and she woke up at like 6 a.m. And we're like, that's crazy. Like that's the first time we've had a full night of sleep in 3 months. So we just haven't messed with that routine. We've basically been running the same basic playbook. Now the milk is mostly like a maybe comfort thing, and sometimes she doesn't even need the milk. But the fundamental routine is the same.
Wow. Love that. And end to end, how much time would you say that took, that routine?
Back then, it was probably like maybe 15, 20-minute thing.
Okay.
I mean, now you could argue the bedtime routine starts with dinner. But like I'd say now it's probably closer to like from the moment we're like, okay, we're having dinner, to getting to bed and sleeping is probably like somewhere around 45 minutes, maybe an hour.
It sounds like structure and routine is pretty important in your house. You mentioned this earlier that structure helps. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I'm a sucker for stealing quotes that I like that resonate. But someone said something like, before you have kids, structure and routine feels limiting. And then after you have kids, structure and routine are liberating. And that resonates a lot for me. If I have some focused work to do, for example, I just pick on work for a second. If I know I need like 2 hours to do some deep work on something, the only way that I can be confident that I'll get it done is if I can count on my structure and my routine. So in that sense, it's liberating me. So when I show up and I sit down to do that work, I feel like I am empowered, like I feel free to do that work. If things are chaotic and unorganized, I feel like that chaos devours planning. I can't get anything focused on in the face of the chaos. Like an example is like, if I have to send an email to my wait list for my course, and that's going to take me 20 minutes or 15, 20 minutes. If I start drafting that email and then dad duties just come and sideswipe everything I'm working on, thankfully now they have a feature that allows me to save a draft, but like I have to abandon that task, and then the context switching costs have to be paid a lot more. So that's kind of an example of how the structure lets me just plan ahead and put stuff on the calendar. Like when I get to this time at this place, I will do this thing. And then I just have to hold myself to the discipline of doing it in the moment, which is something I embrace that responsibility.
Yeah. And you calendar out specific tasks or things that you're going to do so that you remember, oh, I have this block of 1 hour. This is how I remember I'm going to spend this time.
I never used to. And now I find myself really enjoying doing that. I think I was listening to a podcast with Rahul Vora, the founder of Superhuman. I think it was on the Lenny podcast.
Yeah.
And I think he talked about how he follows his curiosity when he works. So if he sits down to do task A, and then task B just starts kind of like bubbling up in his head, like, Rahul, you should really do task B. He doesn't hold himself to like finish task A before he goes into does task B. He trusts his intuition that if my body is telling me task B really needs my attention right now, I'm going to put a pin in task A and I'm going to go do task B. And then when I'm done, I'll look back and I'll track my time. Like, so basically if I spent 15 minutes on task A, maybe I'll just put a 15-minute on my calendar and then 30 minutes on task B to kind of look back. So I'm doing more of that now. And I find that pretty liberating, because I do think that generally speaking, if my intuition points me towards something being more important, I should shift my attention to it. So I have blocks in my calendar. Like after this, I have a 2-hour block, like I mentioned, to grade like some homework assignments. Unless something more important comes up while I'm doing that, that's going to be what I do for those 2 hours. But if something more important or more pressing comes up, I'll probably pause and shift my attention during that.
Great. So sounds like routine's working out well. The bedtime routine still going strong, almost 2.5 years. Can you tell me about some of the other frameworks or principles that you have about parenting?
So our daughter, I don't know if she's going through a growth spurt, but Gaia has been eating a lot. And her favorite new phrase is, I want something else. And she does not know that that applies to things that are not food. Like if we're on the swing at the playground and she says, I want something else. I'm like, oh, you want to go on the slide? And she's like, no, I want a snack, right?
Yeah.
So she uses that term for that. The other thing is, I think some of what we talked about too is not just about the parenting, but more about like the kind of process / general frameworks, is that I will not always agree with my wife on how to handle things as parents. And I think there's always going to be disagreements. I think every couple I know has these. You'll think you're on the same page until you encounter a situation neither of you's thought about before, and you realize you have different views on how to handle it. And I think that being able to recognize those differences, and then when the dust settles, just kind of like reflect on, I thought we should do this, you thought we should do that. I don't know if either of us is right, but I think what's most important is that we're consistent in kind of like how we handle that in the future. So like, let's just talk about it. I feel like that process of just having like just that awareness of the moments where we're not on the same page about something, and the ability to have the conversation about, like, I don't want to say the right way to handle it would be, but a way to handle it would be that at least we're on the same page next time, has been really helpful. And sometimes it's not fun to have those conversations because the last thing you want to do is reflect on like a tantrum that turned into like a argument between us, right? Like a kid's tantrum that turns into a parental argument. I believe in addressing disagreements and conflict kind of like early before it becomes this big thing. So
Yeah.
that's been helpful for us too.
Okay. You mentioned at the start of the show that you have friends in sort of a dad's group in Brooklyn, like a bunch of other, you mentioned girl dads. I'm sure there's some boy dads in there too. How has the dads group been helpful to you?
I was at the playground with Gaia probably like over a year ago and met this other nice guy and his partner and their son. And we started talking and he's like, hey, like I've got this WhatsApp group. You seem like a cool guy. I'll add you. It's called the Dad Milk, which I think is funny. It's a group of about 8 dads here in the neighborhood and that I live in Brooklyn. And we have gotten together as a group probably I don't know, 4 or 5 times in the last 6 to 9 months. But there's a lot of kind of like one-on-one engagement with different, like for example, on Saturday we went to the Bronx Zoo, and one of the dads in the group with his daughter drove me and Carol and Gaia to the Bronx Zoo.
Cool.
So I met him through that group. Yesterday we went to a barbecue in the backyard, which is super rare in Brooklyn, of another dad in the group who was hosting Mother's Day / birthday party celebration for his wife. And they have a daughter in the same daycare as our daughter. So that's the kind of like community and dad group, is like we meet these guys and basically give each other permission to talk about what's awesome about parenting, like after a couple beers, what the challenges are, like that is a group that I'll let loose on. But again, it's intentional. If I'm going to go to a happy hour with the dad group, I know we're going to talk about like dad stuff. It's been equally helpful in like thinking through relationship tensions and relationship problems with Carol, like as it has been with like thinking through parenting stuff with Gaia. And the more time that passes, the less I think there's a clear cut between parenting, as in like the vertical relationship with your kid, and relationships in general, like your marriage or whatever, your relationship with your spouse. Like it feels to me like what the atomic unit is the family, and all of those relationships kind of interplay with each other. So I feel like being able to get together with another group that has all the same kind of set of considerations to play with, it gives me something very different than hanging out with my friends who are married, but no kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And one of the things that's come up on this show a few times is that being a dad can be kind of isolating, and the dads don't often get together and talk about this sort of stuff. And so it sounds like you found something, or even if it's a small group, like you can do that. And that's maybe a little less isolating, which is great.
I don't know how much of it is because I'm signaling in some way that I'm open to it or that I'm inviting that energy, but there's a bigger surface area of organic interactions happening because I take her to the playground. I take her to daycare. Like I'm around, right? I think if I wasn't as like available, I think it would be much harder for me to find that community because I would be kind of like an absentee. But I think one of the reasons I've been very fortunate, I think in the community sense with other dads, is because it's a priority for me to invest time and to be present. And like this conversation we're having right now, talking about parenting and stuff, it just feels so meaningful. Like this is like a very meaningful part of my life. It doesn't feel trivial. So I suspect I put that energy out, and maybe other dads feel like they want to engage and also talk about their experience as dads. But if someone's struggling to find that community, I'm not going to give advice, but I would just maybe ask yourself if you're putting out the energy that's inviting like other dads to want to get real with you about it too.
That makes a lot of sense. You have a somewhat contrarian take about parenting books or baby books. I say contrarian only because there's an entire industry built around dispensing advice to parents in book form and other forms. But your take is that you haven't found that to be particularly helpful, or it's not something that you've pursued. So can you tell me more about that approach?
I've finished 0 baby books, and I don't think I've even made it halfway into any of them. And yet here I am like 2.5 years later, and we don't have everything figured out, but like, we're kind of surviving. Things are working. I love how Gaia is turning out. So I think I just have an open question in my mind about the role of parenting books. If it's possible to get to this point without having read any of them and internalized any of them, then what's the story that I need to tell myself to explain how common and seemingly necessary the parenting books are. I think the most helpful thing from an education perspective for me personally was going to a 3-hour doula workshop in Brooklyn. We had a birth doula that my wife got for herself just for the birth. There was like a 3-hour workshop probably a month or two before her due date.
Mm-hmm.
And we just like, it was us and 3 other couples. I asked like a billion questions, and I felt like it was my chance to just like all the little gaps in my head of what I didn't know to ask about or expect at the birth or after the birth. I just got a chance to ask all of it. And I'm like, cool, I get it now. And then I've been good since then. So I felt like I haven't needed it personally.
I have to ask you a technology and parenting intersection question. So you're pretty involved in AI. You do a lot of things. I don't know, I think you advise maybe some companies there. Anyway, AI, it's a thing. Have you leveraged AI in parenting at all?
Not that I could think of. If something happens, I'll usually Google it. I haven't actually sat down to like chat with Claude or ChatGPT about.
Let me know if you do. I'm very curious about this.
She does really love Alexa though. She officially shouts Alexa, Alexa, and she wants to like play Miss Rachel and other stuff.
Oh, that's cool. So you just mentioned Alexa and Gaia, talking to Alexa. Like, how do you think about the role of technology in her life as she gets older, especially as somebody who's built an entire career in technology?
We generally have a no screens policy with her still. We'll see how long we can stretch it. We about a month ago took a trip, like a vacation to Belize, and brought in my iPad and I downloaded some Miss Rachel on Netflix for her, and that allowed us to get through the flight and the trips and like the car trips. I mean, the drives. As a side effect, when we got back, there was like 48 to 72 hours of just like her demanding like more video, more video, more video. And we basically had to like pull it back and say like, it's broken, you know, you can't use it, but here's Alexa, like let's listen instead. What I'm surprised by is how fast that storm passes, you know, just like she's just forgotten about that now. So I think we're trying to be careful about exposure to screens, but I'm hoping that societally we're gonna kind of normalize not having smartphones and social media until a certain age. I actually do want to read is it Jonathan Haidt's book,
The Anxious Generation.
The Anxious Generation. That's been on my list and I really want to check that out. I think the summaries I've heard of some of the key points he makes resonate a lot with me. I've mentioned some of those to my wife and I think we're on the same page there. But yeah, I don't know. I think I have a very hard time anticipating where technology is going to be when she gets even like 2 or 3 years older. So I'm reserving the right to cross that bridge when I get there, I guess. Just wing it.
Yeah, you never know. We might all be living on Mars by then. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Hopefully she doesn't want to go to Mars.
Probably not Mars. But certainly we'll see. Cell phones, neural link embeds, who knows? Last official startup dad question for you before our lightning round. What would you say is a mistake that you've made as a dad, and what have you learned from it?
I don't talk about this a lot in general because it was like super scary, but I think enough time has passed that's kind of like I can see it clearly now. But basically, when Gaia started walking, we had baby proofed everything inside the apartment so she couldn't open cabinets or access dangerous stuff in the apartment. And we even got the thing that latches to the door, the front door of the apartment to make sure she can't get out. We live in a 4-unit building, so it's like 2 downstairs, 2 upstairs. So we're upstairs, and there's a little stairwell that gets you out of the building. And so if you exit our doorway, there's a stairwell. And we have a little shoe rack. So I went out to put my shoes on, and I guess my daughter Gaia followed me out into the hallway, and she's so quiet. Like I didn't hear her. My wife saw her go out, but she assumed I had her. So I didn't hear her following me. And my wife thought I had her, and I grabbed my shoes and I was going to put them on. As I see her, like I noticed she's there because she was so quiet and so small. I see her standing at the top of the stairwell, and by the time I reach out to grab her, she'd already took a step down the stairs and ended up tumbling down 15 stairs.
Whoa.
And I've never been that scared in my whole life. And she was crying, thankfully, which now I know is a good sign. We rushed to the emergency room, spent the whole rest of our Sunday at the emergency room. She had a bump on her head, but thankfully nothing major happened. I think the more time has passed, the more I kind of feel ownership over that situation, and that I just wasn't paying attention. Ever since then, my learning from that experience is that I have to always know where she is. like when they start walking, it's a new muscle to develop because until they start moving around, like there's only one place they could be. It's like where you left them. And then once they start moving around, even if they're crawling, it's like they can't reach certain things. So they can't. But then once they can walk and they could reach things and they're quiet, they can actually get into places that you don't notice. And for me, I felt like that was the next level learning, is just like be so careful and just take everything super seriously and be more cautious. So yeah, that's a big mistake I feel like I made so far as a dad, and it sucks. Like it was so freaking scary.
Oh, I bet. Well, I'm glad that she's okay. And also, don't beat yourself up too bad, because I feel like that is a dad rite of passage. Well, it's actually a parent rite of passage for your kid to take a big fall or a tumble, and then it never happens again because of exactly what you described. You learn that lesson of like, I got to have my head in a swivel. They're pretty mobile and quiet. They're stealthy. All right, final question for you. How can people follow along or be helpful to you in your journey, parenting or otherwise?
What I write on LinkedIn is one way to kind of follow my thinking. It's probably my go-to place for posting and sharing thoughts these days. Ben Ayres on LinkedIn. And then if someone is in the market for their next role and they're looking to interview with a big tech company, somewhere you might be expected to do a product sense or an analytical thinking interview, check out my course on Maven. It's designed specifically for those two interviews.
Okay, cool. I will send everybody your way. Do we have a few minutes for lightning round?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, here we go. What is the most indispensable parenting product that you have ever purchased?
Probably the Nanit.
Okay. What is the most useless parenting product that you've ever purchased?
Probably our CradleWise.
What is a CradleWise?
It's a smart crib that has a speaker in it, and it has a camera in it, and it got the motion of a snoo baked into it. And we ended up just using it as a crib and got a hatch and a Nanit and never needed the movement action.
So you bought like the all-in-one and then you just didn't use any of the pieces of it.
Just use it as a dumb crib.
Yeah, you unbundled, as they say. I don't know if this is happening yet, but what is the weirdest thing you've ever found in one of Gaia's pockets or in the washing machine?
She's got a habit of collecting pebbles from the park, so her pockets are unexpectedly full of pebbles all the time.
It's a very common refrain on this show. True or false? There is only one correct way to load the dishwasher.
True.
Okay. And is that your way or Carol's way?
It's now my way, but I've learned from Carol that it's the right way.
Excellent. That's the flawless answer to that question. What is your signature dad superpower?
I think just being kind of like an island of calm in the storm. Sometimes I can certainly escalate too, like if I'm not in the right headspace. But I think that I have the ability to create a very calm island for Gaia and just pick her up, hold her, and give her like a nice big calming hug. And I think that it's probably not a unique superpower, but it's something I think I'm good at.
Hey, it's yours. You got it. Given that, what is the crazier block of time in your house? 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.?
I think it's exactly 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is when we're getting ready to go to daycare. And because the daycare is mad at us if Gaia gets there after 9 a.m. and we have a 30-minute walk and sometimes take the bus. So yeah, getting ready for the daycare is like has a deadline, whereas at the end of the day, everything kind of flows when it flows.
Definitely a morning is more chaotic than evening person too. Okay, swings or slides for Gaia?
Nowadays, man, she's like 50-50. Used to be entirely swings for a long time, but now I think she really appreciates slides.
Okay, great. If she had to describe you in one word, what would it be?
She calls me Papa. So she says, Papa fast, Gaia funny. So
I love that. I love that. You are fast.
Fast, I guess.
Yeah, fast. Yeah. What is your go-to dad wardrobe?
Now that it's getting warm out, I really like my Birkenstocks and my shorts and a t-shirt and a hat.
All right. What is your favorite bribe for good behavior?
Gaia loves chocolate. When we feed her anything that is not chocolate, we're going to give her some like mashed potatoes or like sweet potatoes. Or like it's orange chocolate. She basically, anything that has chocolate, she loves.
Love that. She's a girl after my own heart. How many dad jokes do you tell on average in a given day?
Not enough. Yeah, probably none today.
What is the most difficult kids TV show that you've ever had to sit through?
Just like loops of Miss Rachel on YouTube.
Okay. Do you have a favorite kid movie?
I used to love all the Disney ones like The Jungle Book and Aladdin.
Yeah.
Those probably were my favorites.
Okay, now here's a different take here. What nostalgic movie can you not wait to force Gaia to watch when she's old enough to watch it with you?
My wife and I love Forrest Gump. Maybe if she can ever find the will to sit through Forrest Gump with us, I think that would be great.
That is a long movie. Great soundtrack, though. So
I love the movie and love the soundtrack. It's kind of like a perfect movie for me.
what is the worst experience that you ever had assembling a toy or a piece of furniture?
I can't remember when it was, but we ended up having to throw away something we bought at IKEA because I put one of the screws in that in like an irreversibly wrong way. It'd have been a TV stand or something.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to mess around with a TV stand. All right, I think I know the answer to this because George, but how long can a piece of food sit on the floor in your apartment and you will still eat it?
The moment I pick it up, it's likely going to have hair on it immediately. So I think that the question is just how removable is the hair?
Okay, last question for you. I think I probably know the answer to this because you do live in New York. What is your take on minivans?
We don't have a car, but we crossed the country in a minivan when we moved here from SF with George because we didn't have a flight option. And I thought it was amazing how much you could pack into it. We put our whole life in that thing. And other than, like the furniture and stuff we shipped. So was a huge fan of how they handled. I thought it was a great car. And that was the most time I've ever spent in a minivan.
Okay. So you're team minivan, but you don't own a car. So no need for one right now. Makes sense. It's a lot of public transit options in New York. So
And zip cars, rental cars, all that good stuff.
all right, Ben, it has been my absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for joining me, and thanks for talking about your family. And I wish you the best of luck with your family and your portfolio career.
Thanks, Adam. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate the invite.